14 WILI and 95.3 FM presents Hometown Threads, a closer look at our community and the people that make it go. Every week, you'll hear uplifting stories from our local businesses and our neighbors. Now, here's our host for Hometown Threads, Keith C. Rice.
All right, welcome to the debut show of Hometown Threads here on 14 WILI, 95.3, and Willimantic Today Facebook. This is kind of a groundbreaking moment here, kind of like a TV show on Facebook, right here in our town, Willimantic, Connecticut. My name is Keith C. Rice. We'll get to our special guest in just a second, our first guest here on Hometown Threads. We'll tell you a little about what Hometown Threads is all about and what you can expect every Tuesday and Wednesday when the show will be on Facebook. It'll air on Willimantic Today on Wednesdays. And big thanks to RJ and the admin team over at Willimantic Today. I guess I should send out my thank yous right now. Matt Rupar, Matt Rupar is producing here at the radio station. And everyone that gave me a thumbs up to give this show a go, including the gentleman right to my right here, who many of you already know, just a sec. But Hometown Threads every Tuesday here on WILI, 5:05 to 5:30. You can expect stories, inspiring stories from local business owners and how their company was started. Maybe just a wonderful member from our community that's just got an inspiring story to tell. It doesn't have to necessarily be a local business owner. So, with that being said, let's get the show started. We have about 20-25 minutes to work with, and it is a pleasure to bring in our first ever guest on Hometown Threads. Speaking of local businesses, couldn't ask for a better first guest, a Rice. I'm Keith C. Rice. This is my father, Colin K. Rice, and today we'll talk a little about another Rice, Herbert C. Rice. But Dad, it's a pleasure to have you here. This show just came about, well, within the past few weeks, and you're one of the first people to, sign off on it. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of a, what would you call it, inaugural launch.
I was going to use that word, inaugural launch, right?
By the way, I have this small thing. Is hometown one word?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so if we ever shortened it, it'd be HT, Hometown Thread.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm happy to be here.
Here we are, Hometown Threads on WILI and Willimantic Today Facebook. So let's get right to it. We have so many amazing stories which led to the concept of this show, like just people that come in to record commercials. I can name a few people: Chris McNabo from Horizons, Dave Wallner from Willie Brew. We have so many great local businesses in this town, in this area, right, that just nobody really knows how the business got started. So WILI, Nutmeg Broadcasting, I've been, in and out of the station for the past 30 plus years. And here I am, and I pretty much know the story, but I love hearing it again. How did Grandpa get WILI started? Well, back in 1957.
Well, the station actually went on the air, as we all know. Wayne reminds us every year, October 5th, 12 noon, 1957. But Herb Rice was not involved with the station. A couple of gentlemen from Putnam, Connecticut were. I believe the last name was Goyette, and I forgot his partner. They were good at a lot of things, including building radio towers and radio stations, because they had one on in Putnam. WPCT, which preceded WINY, 1350, was on first. They were on in 1955. So then they said, let's build another one in Willimantic, and they did. They didn't really, I always say they didn't really know how to run it right, but they had other interests, so they didn't know about advertising, how difficult it was to write, produce, and sell ads. So in a couple of years, they wanted to do other things. They put it on the market. That's when Herb Rice picked up the fact that this is an opportunity for him and his family. He lived in Stamford, worked in New York, wanted to run a business of his own with some help from friends and the bank. He borrowed money, and I believe the story is he paid $80,000 for WILI 1400, which was already on the air, and he did that in 1959. That was my first trip to Willimantic. I was 10 years old, and I came here on a summer weekend as my dad was just getting the reins and starting the station.
Now, before we continue, was this, you spent a year, the family spent a year in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Yeah, it was preceded that.
Did it go Coeur d'Alene, then Willimantic?
Actually, there was about 6 months at Darien while he got his ducks in a row and got his financing placed. He always had his eye on WILI, but when we came back from Idaho, which was a great 3 years of my life, we did spend some time in Darien, and then that was 6 months, and then we were up here. And the first night I spent in Willimantic, it was a weekday because I came up with just my dad.
Hotel Hooker?
No, right next to it.
Get out!
The Nathan Hale Hotel.
See, you learned something. I don't
They
think
had
I knew
a little
this.
old guy who ran the elevator, and they had a beautiful restaurant called the Iron Horse, and the rooms were very nice hotel rooms, and it had the dining room, and it was a very nice hotel. And I spent the week there. When my dad was at the radio station, I went to Lauder Park, hang around.
So
And by the way, the station was, as a lot of people know, out in North Windham, in what is now we call the dentist office, Connecticut Orthodontics or whatever it is.
by the airport, right?
Right by the airport. That was the radio station.
What was WILI 1400 before it was WILI? Who was running it, and what was the format?
I know very little about that.
Oh, okay. Maybe Wayne does.
No, I couldn't tell you.
So all right. So October 5th is when.
It went on the air, but we bought it in the summer of '59, 2 years later.
Okay, so that's when it became officially in the Rice hands,
right.
1959.
And by the way, the original company was Willie Broadcasting, because it was only the one radio station. Didn't become Nutmeg for another 10 years.
Something else I didn't know. I always thought it was not.
After WINY, my father, who already knew who Mike Girardi was because he worked for him, found out about WPCT, remember Putnam, Connecticut, and he bought that from Goyette. And so it became Willie, and he changed the call letters in Putnam to Winnie, Willie and Winnie.
So Willie and Winnie pretty much came together around the same time.
I would say it was about 3 years between the two.
Okay, so tell us about the early years. What you can remember, what Grandpa had told you about when, in 1959, when the station first signed on. Do you remember any of Grandpa's? Did he tell you? I know you don't. Well, you were like 12 years old, but any of Grandpa's early hires, or do you remember listening to the station, or were you hanging around
I
there?
listened
at
on
that
a
age?
crystal radio. Matt, do you know what a crystal radio is?
No.
A crystal radio is literally a little crystal chip in a piece of aluminum, and you put a needle on it, and then you tune on a coil. You tune. There's no power. It's absolutely powerless radio, and that crystal can find frequencies, and it found 1400, and you put an earpiece, and you can listen to the radio station from the crystal. It's called crystal radio, and I used to listen because it was cool. It was like a Boy Scout project, and you tuned in your local radio station. Anyway, I knew very little bit about the politics of running radio. I knew there was a lot of pressure on Dad to turn a profit, pay his bills. And he learned very quickly that having a radio station in North Windham, people could hear it on all their radios, but they weren't really listening because they were listening to WTIC. Why? Because that's how they grew up. WTIC was their radio station. Oh, there's a radio station in town? Well, I have everything I need right here.
50,000 watt blowtorches.
Right,
My father.
Bob Steele.
That's
Why
right.
would you want anything else? It gives me everything I need. So my father realized that.
So that leads me to my next question. From North Windham, WILI eventually moved to 948 Main Street,
Right.
and tell us about when that all happened and how it all went down.
For you newcomers out there, 948 is right now Stone Row. Used to be Cafe Mantic. That building was the broadcast house, and it said right on it, broadcast house, and it had a large plate glass window in the center and two smaller windows on the left and right. We have a picture back there. And in the center window was the man, mostly men at the time, on the air. So anybody driving up and down Main Street, and if you're familiar with Willimantic in the 60s, Main Street was the place to be. There was no mall, and there was Thursday night shopping, and it was a very busy town. People driving by the radio station at 948 Main Street would look in the glass window and say, "What's that guy saying?" And we had a little sign that said it's 1400. So they turned their local radio station on out of curiosity, and then they became listeners.
How did Grandpa find that location?
Oh, I don't know. I wasn't in on that. I can't tell you.
I just didn't know if he ever might have told you. That's a great location. I mean,
Well,
that's.
he had a local contractor build the building. Actually, Evelyn Lonigan built it, and he rented the ground floor.
Wow. And that's where I got my start in that building, which is, as you just said,
And I got a story
Stone
about our
Row.
host, Keith Rice.
Huh?
Keith Rice would listen to Henry Paulus at night, and Henry Paulus would do the station breaks between midnight
You got to
and
explain who
6.
Henry is. Henry is affectionately
come
used to
on,
be
he's the
affectionately.
doctor.
Well, that's what I was about to say. No one knows him as Henry Paulus. He's the doctor, the doc.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Anyway, Henry would do overnights, and he came to us from Wyndham High, and all he would do were the station breaks at the top and bottom of the hour, and he would go, "This is overnight now," and Keith would be listening at the age of, I don't know, 4 or 5.
10. Well, enough.
Yeah, but you were pretty young at the time. And he'd go, W-I-L-I, Willimantic. So one day, my little boy comes to me and he says, could I see the man who does that? Is he down there on the radio? I said, yeah, he's down there on the radio. I said, yeah, okay, we'll go down there some night. So some night we get in the car, we drive by, and there's Henry in the big glass window. And he got the bug. He said, that's the guy on the radio.
You know, that's how I got the bug. I like to give the late and great Larry King a lot of credit, but that story he just told is absolutely true. I guess I was probably like 5 or 6 in that range where I hear Henry's voice, who was running the board for the nationally syndicated Larry King show. And I was so fascinated. I wonder if Doc even knows that. Yeah. And I had such a, like, wow, that is so cool. And then he'd show me Henry in that little window. I was like, yeah, that's how it all, I fell in love with the business.
Yeah, and there's something about late night radio when you realize you're not the only one up. There's other people up. Of course there are. There are policemen and people who are working at the waterworks. But this guy is on the radio and he's talking to me. I'd like to see what he looks like.
Oh, the Doc. So there's so many great early stories that are connected, especially, of course, I go back to 948 where I first started, 948 Main Street, now Stone Row Kitchen and Bar, as you said, formerly Cafe Mantic, and not a day goes by where I drive by that place. I look in, where that window was, and that's where I was, Wayno first hired me, and I cracked the mic there, and when we were doing live commercial tags back then, that's when, you hear a commercial and you actually would come on live and do the tag. And I'll never forget, when I first cracked the mic there, it was a Sunday afternoon, and Wayno used to come in, he's there all the time. And he's standing behind me. I do the 5-second tag, and then he reaches over my shoulder. I was so excited. He turns off the mic. I was so excited I forgot to turn off the microphone. But so how did you? We now we know how the business started, how 948 Main Street came about. How did you? You have an engineering degree from Villanova University, a fine university, a fine institution. How did you become the engineer and an executive at the same time?
Oh, it wasn't the same time.
Well, not at the same time, but how did Grandpa kind of rope you in there?
Well, he said, my family, my father and mother had 6 children, and 2 of them were boys, and the oldest was Michael, and my father said, you're going to go to college and become an engineer, because one of the things that you didn't have a lot of at the time were engineers to keep you on the air, and the technology was a little bit rougher and more crude, so when your transmitter off the air, you really had to fix it and not just go to a backup. It was the only transmitter you had, so he relied on, of all things, a television repairman. And if there was a problem at the station, he needed the television repairman who's had a local business to come and fix his transmitter. Well, he has an appointment at Mrs. Smith's house. I'll be there after I fix her TV. No, we're off the air. We can't sell anything. Anyway, he says sent his boys to college to become electrical engineers. And Uncle Mike was the engineer. He worked at Electromotive and took care of the station. And then a few years later, I would say 5 or 6, I came and I was the full-time engineer.
Now, honestly, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're my dad. I can do that. Well, at least I think I can. Maybe I'll pay the price later. You're still the engineer to this day. By the way, he gets the call first and I get the call.
What happened this morning?
Let me guess. Did the station go off the air?
The power went off. Did you know that?
The power went off, yes.
Yeah.
Brief power outage.
It was a Main Street power outage.
So one of us usually gets the call these days to put the station back on the air. So I guess I'm kind of an engineer. I don't have a degree.
Yes, no.
But anyway, this is what I want to ask you. I know Grandpa wanted you to be an engineer. Did you have any say in it? Put him on.
No, actually I didn't. If he was going to pay my college loan bill, and he did. Thank you, Dad.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what I would have done. I was pretty good at math. I didn't know much about electronics.
Yeah, did you have a backup plan? I never even asked you that. You never had a backup plan?
No.
Wow.
No, I was going to college. I don't know what happens next.
No, if you did, never became an engineer and then a sales exec and executive vice president. Anyway, we all know what happened, and it's worked out well, especially with the family business. And now, Hall Communications took over in 2005, and they're almost like an extended family. But I got to say, what are some of your highlights over the years? And when did you actually? This is the first question after the engineering. When did you merge into sales and then become an executive?
Well, that was gradual. I would say the next 10 years of my life, 70s, early 80s, was all engineering because we built some radio stations and we expanded the company. And then I would say early 80s, I would take on a few accounts because we had sold Southington. That commute was no longer on the record.
WNTY in
Right.
Southington.
And I believe right around a little bit later we sold Old Saybrook, WLIS. So I was in town more, and engineering became a little bit more common sense because the equipment was just getting better, and we had backup, and so I took on a few accounts, and just I didn't really go into sales as a major income producer. I just went in there because it was the thing to do, and I'm glad I did because I established new relationships.
And you bring up a good point. You did have more help back then. We had actually an engineer, the late and great Craig Mellon, who we
Yep.
miss dearly. And then the sales staff grew. Of course, we had, you mentioned, I know you mentioned that we sold LAS, then, but we didn't sell Winnie and WINY, as we call it, Winnie,
No.
and Putnam until a little bit later, right?
Late '80s, yep. My dad sold it to his son-in-law, my brother-in-law, Mike Girardi, and his wife, our sister Kathy, and that was a hometown deal. I mean, he grew up in Putnam, and they ran a tremendous radio station, and that now is owned by Gary O, because Mike's retired, and he lives in Florida.
And Gary O is kind of like the Wayno of Putnam, I guess
Yeah,
you'd
I would say so.
And boy, and as we like to really keep it local here, I think we do a pretty good job at it. Gary O up in Putnam, we got to give him a lot of
Yep.
props. That's exactly how he wanted to run it, and he's done a tremendous job of that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have about 5-10 minutes left of this debut show of Hometown Threads here on 14 WILI
What's that called?
95.3, and
When you guys do it on talk shows, you reformat, you
you got to reset.
reset. Who's the guest?
This is Colin Rice.
Oh, hi.
I was getting to that actually.
Resetting is great. I know, I interrupted you. Reset. It's very important in
That's right.
talk radio. You never know when someone just turned on the dial, just like giving the score of the game.
That's right. And somebody who could be watching this on Willimantic Today Facebook halfway through.
Right. Who is this? Reset.
Maybe somebody fell asleep watching this on Facebook. So I'm Keith C. Rice. This is Colin K. Rice. These are the studios of 14 WILI 95.3 FM. Hometown Threads is the show. Brand new show, 5:05 to 5:30 on the radio Tuesdays and Wednesdays. You can look for it atop Willimantic Today Facebook. So as we get ready to almost wrap this first show up, how about some of the main highlights that jump out at you
I got
all
it,
your
I got it.
years?
Matt, you'll love this. You got to remember, the generation growing up in the 70s was a little bit more, I won't say playful. We have college influence here, and there was plenty of, and Wayne was of that age where he attracted listeners with imaginations. And Halloween is always a big deal around the country. Mischief Night. You know what Mischief Night is?
Amateur night.
Wasn't it always the 30th, though, the day before? In any case, the night before Halloween, there'd always be pranksters, and they'd set up a little something on what is called the major parcel, a little motif about something political. You know, every year it'd be something different. Here are the two biggies I remember. One year, they put a Volkswagen on the footbridge, and I don't think the engine was in, so they carried it and left it on the footbridge. That was one. Another one was they built a rocket ship where 700 Main Street is. That's the
Art space?
no, right next door. That's where Joe Duval's building is.
Oh,
It was an empty lot, and they built a rocket ship with a voice in it saying "Countdown to launch, launch failure," something like that. And the joke was, all the buildings had been knocked down during redevelopment, but nothing was ever built in their place. That building wasn't there. This building wasn't here, and they're making fun of the fact that Willimantic Redevelopment Agency was great at knocking down buildings, and there were a lot of buildings here, but they're not great at building anything. Launch failure. Here's the best one. One Halloween, Wayne wakes up. He's on the radio. As he comes into Main Street, he sees a big green footprint on Main Street, like a footprint right down the middle of the Main Street. And then while he's on the air and it's just getting light, he's talking about it because they knew he would talk about it. A head pops up with a mask on, and they take the footprint, which is like a big pad, and he stamps a green footprint on the window and runs away. Prankster. And it gave Wayne all kinds of stuff to talk about. If we had camera phones, we'd have taken pictures. And they even called him up later on and told him how they did it. They took a Volkswagen, a different Volkswagen, cut out the floor and put in a wheel with a stamp on it. So as the foot come up, they would paint it, and then it would go down, and it went right down Main Street.
That's amazing.
Yeah, every Halloween.
How old was I?
something
I
to
don't
talk
remember this.
about.
I probably was too young, right?
Yeah, and that's what I remember, the pranksters. And the fact that you were on Main Street, you were always part of something. And it gave the host all kinds of things to talk about.
Well, as we get ready to wrap up the first ever edition of Hometown Threads, and my guest here, my father, Colin K. Rice, I'm Keith C. Rice, talking about how WILI came to existence.
Yep.
Why don't we just name a few people that have made this place go over the years? People that
Sure.
aren't with us anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
not working here or not even on this earth anymore, but people we should probably mention.
Yeah.
If you want to name some names and.
Oh, I'm going to miss some.
I mean, there's so many people.
Matt, how much time?
4 minutes.
Okay. Obviously, the people I knew before I was even here were very important because they had a real news presence like Jay Johnson. But then when Dave and Wayne came from UConn, they really put together a format that was unusual for AM. And it really clicked. And a lot of our talent came from university. There was Larry Davis. There was Dan Hayden. And they came from all over because we had a unique format. We were right next to Shabu. We had all kinds of music influences. And we were a stereo AM, which was kind of like a laugh. But we were stereo mono or whatever. In any case, those people were key to building the infrastructure here that made us a success. And then we got the FM in the mid-'80s.
I was just about to say, and I'm glad you that's a perfect transition. This is the man right here that started I-98.3 back in 1985. You bought the frequency, which was 98.3, correct me if I'm wrong, and I know you will, was WXLS, then WNOU.
Yep.
And then when you bought the frequency in 85, when did we first sign on? Was it October of 85?
Yeah, it was late 85, 86.
So I was 13,
and
14.
then we built this station. But your listeners have to remember that these AM beat out the FM because we were so integral to the community. And that sounds funny by today's standards. And the FM couldn't make money under different ownership, so they finally caved and they sold it. I want to mention one more person that's made this place great. And I'm not kidding. You have always been there behind the scenes, and now you're really in the front of the scenes. And this is a remarkable idea you have here, because let's face it, everything's changing, and radio can be a very integral part of the internet. What am I trying to say? Of
Social media.
Social media. The marriage of the two is very interesting. And this is a launch that's going to go somewhere.
Well, I'm honored, and I literally got goosebumps under my long sleeve shirt here that you're my first guest. And as I said, and I know we got to wrap this up. This show was approved so quickly because I really thought, as my father just said, the marriage of radio and social media here in 2022. I thought, doing a radio show is fun, and a local radio show. I'm all about that. But tying it in with like such a platform like Facebook and Willimantic today, where our community is it's such a tight knit, and they love WILI. I figured let's get people on like my father to talk about how local businesses started. There's so many great stories, and not just local business owners, but as I said at the top of the show, we have so many great community members that have great stories as well. So,
and isn't it remarkable these two radio stations, and yes, there's an FM, have morning men that add up to 87 years of continuity?
I thought about that too. In fact, I posted on my Keith C. Rice Facebook page a few times. Wayne's
Wayne Norman
52, right?
Pete Nichols.
Pete's about 30. So round it off, you're
About
looking
35 years.
Combined, you're looking at over 80 years of local morning show radio experience.
And as Jim Bohannon, God rest his soul, said today on Wayne's replay, he said, it's remarkable that you've been there all that time.
Unbelievable. So we have so many exceptional potential guests that we could line up in the show. I'm so excited. First ever Hometown Threads in the books. My name is Keith C. Rice. Again, thanks to my father, Colin K. Rice, executive for Nutmeg Broadcasting and Hall Communications, for joining us to tell us a little about the start of WILI. Look forward to joining you next week on Hometown Threads. Again, Tuesdays, 5:05 to 5:30 on 14 WILI 95.3 FM. Wednesdays on Willimantic Today Facebook. If you'd like to reach out, you have an idea for a guest, or maybe you'd like to be a guest, you can email me, krice@hallradio.net, or just search for me on Facebook, Keith C. Rice. Thanks again.
And that concludes another edition of Hometown Threads. Got a story for Keith? Reach out to him on Facebook by searching Keith C. Rice, or email him at krice@hallradio.net. Don't forget to tune in next week on 14 WILI and 95.3 FM, as well as the Willimantic Today page on Facebook.